Beneath the mirrored surface of the Red Sea, where the sunlight drifts like liquid gold through silence, something ancient waits. The water gleams with a strange calm, as if it remembers. Between the coral cliffs and the shifting sands below, shadows move that are not of fish or current. They are the shapes of stone, carved long before any written history, long before the pharaohs drew borders on papyrus. The Red Sea is not merely a body of water. It is a corridor between worlds, between Africa and Arabia, between myth and memory. Along its coasts once stood ports that glowed with incense fires and the cries of traders from Egypt, Punt, and Sheba. In the first millennium before our time, Egyptian expeditions sailed these waters in search of gold and aromatic resins. Later came the Romans, charting routes to India, leaving behind anchors, amphorae, and faint traces of harbors now buried under the tide. And yet, there are ruins that fit no empire. Divers off the coasts of Egypt and Sudan have found symmetrical formations beneath the coral, fragments of pillars, paving stones, carved slabs that seem too deliberate for nature. Some lie near the ancient trade center of Berenik, others off the shores of Massawa and Suakin. The sea hides them tenderly, wrapping every column in coral, every inscription in salt. Legends speak of Shuraba, the city of lamps, a port that shone so brightly that sailors claimed they could see its towers from leagues away at night. Others tell of Iram, the lost city of pillars, mentioned in the Quran, a civilization so proud that it was swallowed by the wrath of creation. Historians place Iram in the sands of Arabia, yet some explorers whisper that its remains rest here, under the Red Sea, where sand and salt are one. The ocean floor here is a realm of riddles. Beneath the calm surface lies a network of ancient valleys, remnants of the great rift that once tore continents apart. Thousands of years ago, before these waters deepened, this land may have been dry, fertile, alive. When the sea flooded it, the settlements vanished, preserved in their final breath beneath the rising tide. As the light fades deeper down, the world begins to blur. A diver drifts through curtains of blue and silver, the only sound his own heartbeat echoing through eternity. Then, a shape, a column half-buried, draped in coral. The delicate ribs of architecture peer through the living reef. A few meters beyond, a carved face, its features softened by centuries, gazes upward toward the sun it can no longer see. The current moves like breath across its cheek. The mind begins to wander. Could this have been a temple? A harbor shrine? Perhaps the statue was once a guardian of the gate, a sentinel of trade routes between empires, now guarding only silence. On the seabed, a broken amphora rests, Greek in design, its lip adorned with spirals of palms and waves. Such vessels once carried frankincense, the perfume of gods. Now they carry only sand. Archaeologists who study these coasts often find layers of civilizations stacked like whispers: Egyptian, Nabatean, Aksumite, Byzantine. Each left traces of walls, coins, and pottery. Each believed their age would endure. Yet the Red Sea accepts all equally. It erases, but gently, replacing stone with coral, carving history into silence. Somewhere deeper, beneath the reefs and trenches, a faint glimmer of marble catches the last rays of a descending sun. A single hand, carved from white stone, reaches through the sand, fingers extended toward the surface. Around it, the water moves with the patience of centuries. Perhaps the city beneath the Red Sea was never lost, only asleep. Time here moves like breath. Every current is a whisper, every bubble a syllable of the same endless story. That civilizations do not die, they only change form. Their prayers become waves. Their music becomes wind beneath the water. No trace of it remains today, only fragments of legend, and the faint glint of silica scattered in deserts where no city should have been. Archaeologists have found, near the old Silk Road in northern Iran, layers of vitrified stone, sand melted to glass by heat no fire could produce. Some believe these were the remnants of a fortress struck by catastrophe, a lightning storm beyond measure, or the breath of a star fallen to earth. Others whisper that the people themselves became glass, frozen mid-motion by the brilliance they sought to master. The oldest tales describe its creation by artisans who learned to shape sunlight itself. They built towers that rose like frozen music and domes that reflected each other infinitely, so that whoever entered the city saw not walls but an endless horizon of light. The inhabitants walked slowly, for every step risked breaking the very ground they had built. A floor so polished it reflected the heavens perfectly. They said their souls were double, one of flesh, one of reflection. In the city's center stood the Hall of Breath, where no word was ever spoken. Its dome was lined with transparent crystal that caught every whisper of wind and turned it into faint song. There, the king and his council gathered not to speak, but to listen, to the tone of the air, to the sound of the light. They believed that truth was not said but resonated. It is said that at night, when the world outside grew dark, the city itself became the sky. The glass towers caught starlight, and the people walked through constellations made by their own reflections. But beauty that perfect cannot endure. One day, or perhaps one night, the light turned against them. The chroniclers of later ages spoke of a storm that came without warning. A soundless wind, brighter than fire, sweeping through the city. The towers shivered, their surfaces trembling like the surface of a lake. Then, in an instant, everything shattered. The air filled with rain made of mirrors, and the kingdom of glass became a desert of dust. For centuries, caravans avoided the region. The ground there still glittered faintly, as though light had been buried beneath its surface. Even the camels grew uneasy, refusing to cross. In time, the wind covered everything, until only sand remained. Yet sometimes, when twilight falls and the desert glows with that strange silver hue between day and night, travelers say they glimpse the faint outline of towers rising from the heat, their walls gleaming in silence. Scientists who've studied the vitrified plains of Dashti Cavern find traces of fused quartz, melted at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees, higher than any ancient furnace could achieve. They speak of meteor strikes or lightning glass formed by desert storms. But no crater, no scar, no explanation endures. The desert remembers differently. Its memory is made of shimmer. If you walk there at dusk, and the wind is gentle, you might hear it. A faint chiming sound, like broken glass moving in rhythm beneath the sand. It is the city breathing slowly, faintly, as though it dreams of returning to form. Perhaps the kingdom was never meant to last. Perhaps it was a mirror the world held up to itself, too fragile to endure its own reflection. And maybe the dust that drifts across the plain tonight, the same dust that settles on the traveler's hands, on the lips, in the eyes, is not dust at all, but what remains of a city that once captured light, and learned too late that even light can break. The diver rises slowly, leaving behind the ruins, the coral towers, the statues that will never again see the sky. Above, the world brightens, the sea surface shimmering like a mirror to another age. In that reflection, for a heartbeat, it feels as though the ancient city breathes again, its streets glowing in the twilight of remembrance. Then the ripples fold over, and everything is still. On a mountainside cloaked in mist, where the road fades into cloud and time itself seems to hesitate, there hangs a bell that no hand has touched in 1,000 years. It rests within a crumbling monastery overlooking a valley so deep that sound itself takes moments to return. Yet every few winters, on a night of heavy fog, the bell rings. Once, then silence. The villagers in the valley below call it the breath of stone. They have heard it all their lives. A single low tone that drifts across the fog like memory. Some say it is the mountain breathing. Others whisper that it tolls for a soul lost between worlds. But the monks who once lived there, if they ever truly existed, left no record except a single inscription carved into the wall of the belfry. Not every sound seeks to be heard. Historians believe the monastery may date back to the 11th century, part of the Himalayan network of small Buddhist hermitages that flourished under the huge kingdom. Early explorers noted ruins high above the Sutlej River valley. Narrow corridors, prayer wheels fossilized in place, and a bell of bronze alloyed with meteoric iron. The metal itself was unusual. It hummed faintly when struck by wind, producing a tone that seemed to hang in the air longer than any human-made sound should. The last monk recorded there, in a fading manuscript found in Ladakh, wrote of a bell that rings when the world sleeps deeply enough to hear it. He described nights so quiet that the stars seemed to lean closer, as if listening. "It does not call us," he wrote. "It remembers us." When a British expedition climbed to the ruins in 1904, they found the bell still hanging, green with age but whole. It was massive, nearly 2 meters in diameter, carved with spirals and small figures that looked like waves turning into clouds. No one could move it. One explorer claimed that when he stood beneath it, he felt a vibration through his chest, though no sound was made. They camped nearby that night. At precisely 12 minutes past midnight, as mist rolled from the valley, the bell rang. A single deep tone that lasted longer than breath. They fled before dawn. In the morning, the camp's barometer had cracked, and the air felt strangely heavy. When they returned years later, the monastery had collapsed, and the bell was gone. Locals say it was never stolen, never buried. It simply disappeared into the fog. But sometimes, when the valley is filled with mist thick as milk, the sound returns. Always once, always after midnight. Physicists have tried to explain it. Some say the bell was made of a rare alloy that expands in cold, creating resonance as temperature drops. Others point to the echo of falling stones, distorted by layers of fog. Yet none can explain why it happens only in deep winter, when the stars are brightest and always at the same hour. In Tibetan oral tradition, there are older stories of singing mountains where the sound of enlightenment was said to rest. The monks believed the bell's note marked the border between waking and dream, a moment when the mind pauses and the world inhales. To hear it, they said, was to be reminded of one's impermanence, to feel the thinness between breath and eternity. If you stand in that valley today, the path to the monastery overgrown and lost, you can still sense something in the air. The wind moves differently there, slower, heavier, like thought made visible. At night, frost gathers on the stones, and the stars shimmer above the fog like small, listening eyes. Then, just before midnight, the silence deepens, so complete that even your heartbeat sounds like an intrusion. And then it comes, low, resonant, sorrowful, vast. The sea keeps its silence. The world above sleeps, never knowing that beneath, the Red Sea still dreams. A kingdom of light, buried in blue. The bell's note moves through the valley, touching every stone, every sleeping house. The sound lingers, then fades into the folds of cloud, leaving behind the feeling that the mountain itself has spoken, softly, to no one and to all. Perhaps the bell was never meant to summon, but to remember. Perhaps it rings not to mark time, but to hold it still for a moment between life and whatever follows. And when its final echo dissolves into mist, the night becomes whole again, silent, vast, and waiting for another century's breath. There is a valley in Anatolia where the wind never dies. Between cliffs that seem carved from shadow, an archway of stone stands alone, weathered, immense, and older than memory. It has no roof, no door, no markings that can be read. Yet when one steps before it and whispers, the voice returns, not as an echo, but as an answer. The shepherds call it Bab al-Sada, the Gate of Echoes. For centuries, they have told stories of travelers who spoke their names before it and heard something else spoken back. Words in forgotten tongues, sometimes gentle, sometimes pleading. The Ottoman chronicler of Leah Shalebi mentioned the valley in passing, writing of a stone that repeats not what is said, but what was meant. Archaeologists rediscovered the site in 1957 while surveying Bronze Age trade routes between Cappadocia and the Taurus Mountains. The structure was unlike anything they had seen. 2 pillars of volcanic basalt supporting a single lintel of obsidian, fused as though by lightning. Seismic studies revealed the stone emitted faint vibrations at specific frequencies, resonating differently depending on the time of day. Local elders refused to approach after sunset, saying that night remembers more than the living should hear. Theories abound. Some believe the gate once marked a temple of Hittite origin, its acoustics designed for ritual chants that could be heard miles away. Others claim it was a threshold, not between spaces, but between worlds, a symbolic passage where sound became spirit. No text or carving survives to confirm its builder's purpose. Only the resonance remains. If you stand there at dusk, when the air cools and the valley turns blue, the silence becomes enormous. You might feel the faintest hum rising through the soles of your feet, a sound too low to hear, more sensed than perceived. And if you speak, your voice returns with a slight delay, but altered, softened, as if translated by time. Some describe it as hearing themselves older, wiser, or long gone. Others say the echo does not belong to them at all. In 1974, an engineer named Salim Rahman camped near the gate to record its acoustics. His tapes captured something impossible. Echoes that answered before his own words finished, forming syllables that were not part of the test. On the last night of the expedition, his diary ended with a single line. It spoke first tonight. In an abandoned monastery on the edge of the Levant, there once lay a map no one could decipher. Its parchment had grown thin and brittle, its ink faded to the color of smoke. Yet beneath candlelight, faint lines shimmered, a labyrinth of rivers that led not to places, but to silences. On one corner, in the margin worn by centuries of touch, a single phrase remained legible in ancient Greek. Follow the stars that no longer exist. The tapes were later found blank. Only the background wind remained, shifting like breath across stone. Scientists speak of complex interference, overlapping frequencies from hidden caves, creating the illusion of response. But those who have stood there know better. The air itself feels aware, as if each word spoken awakens something vast beneath the valley floor. Not malevolent, but ancient, weary, waiting. Some pilgrims still journey there. They bring questions, not prayers. Each stands alone before the gate and speaks softly, not to be answered, but to be heard by the earth. One poet wrote, "The stones do not echo, they remember." There is a legend that the gate was part of a pair, one lost to the sea, one left to guard the mountains. Between them, it was said, all words once traveled, a bridge of sound between the human and the divine. When that connection was broken, the gate fell silent, left to murmur only to itself. Yet, on rare nights of equinox, when the moon rests directly above the arch, travelers claim the valley hums as though filled with distant voices, thousands, rising and falling like waves. The ground trembles lightly, and the arch glows faintly blue, as if remembering. Perhaps the gate was never meant to speak to us. Perhaps it listens, gathering every sound, every whisper, every secret spoken to the earth, keeping them safe until time has the courage to return them. And when you leave the valley, the sound follows you for a while, faint, rhythmic, like your own footsteps repeating behind you even when the path is empty. Maybe the gate of echoes is not answering us at all. Maybe it is still waiting for the first word that was ever spoken to finally come back home. Somewhere beyond the maps of the living, past deserts where the wind forgets its own name, there is said to be a garden that does not age. The map was discovered in 1893 by a wandering scholar named Émile Dufresne, who had spent years tracing the trade routes between Alexandria, Damascus, and the ancient city of Palmyra. He believed it to be a relic of the Ptolemaic age, drawn by a geographer who mapped both land and dream. The lines were not consistent with any known topography. Rivers flowed uphill, mountains formed spirals, and deserts appeared to breathe. It was as though the mapmaker had not drawn the world as it was, but as it remembered itself to be. No one has ever found it twice. Those who claim to have walked its paths describe the same vision. An orchard hidden behind veils of mist, where the air smells of rain though no clouds pass, and the leaves shimmer with a faint inner light, as if touched by memory rather than sunlight. It is called many things, the garden beyond time, the silent grove, the field without shadow. But in every tongue, the stories agree. Inside, nothing grows old, and nothing dies. The earliest mention comes from a Babylonian tablet, cracked and half-lost, that speaks of a place where the years do not pass, yet all things remember their beginning. Later, Greek pilgrims called it Orchard of Kronos, a remnant of eternity fallen into the world. Medieval mystics whispered of it as the last echo of Eden, the point where heaven's breath still lingers upon the soil. Somewhere, between myth and geography, its name endured, a rumor that drew scholars, wanderers, and hermits through centuries of silence. In the 1890s, a British explorer named Arthur Lemaine vanished while tracing ancient caravan routes through the deserts east of Damascus. His last diary entry read, "The air grows thick and sweet. I hear water but see no spring. The horizon folds like silk. I think I have crossed the border of time." 3 months later, his camel returned to camp alone, its hooves dusted with pollen from no known plant. No one has found him nor the garden. Yet sometimes, in the archives of forgotten libraries, his sketches resurface. Drawings of winding paths where no shadow falls, and trees with translucent trunks that reflect constellations instead of sky. Scholars have tried to explain it, hallucination from thirst, heat, or solitude. But mystics suggest something gentler, that the garden exists not in space, but in the pause between moments, the silence that separates one heartbeat from the next. It is not a place you find. It is a place that finds you. Those who claim to have entered it speak of a strange stillness, like standing in the breath of the world before it became word. They describe flowers that do not bend in wind, fountains that rise but never fall, and the faint sound of bells beneath the soil, ringing as if underwater. Emile carried the map with him for years. He wrote in his journals that when he gazed upon it under moonlight, the ink seemed to move, like veins pulsing beneath the skin of the world. Some said it was merely an illusion of candle flame, but others whispered that the map was alive, shifting each time it was read, contained not destinations, but thresholds. One hermit, interviewed near Palmyra in 1932, described it softly. "You do not see the garden with your eyes. You feel it remembering you. It has known you always. Perhaps the garden was never meant to be entered, only brushed against, like a dream brushing the edge of waking." For every story ends the same. Once the traveler steps outside, they find the world changed. The stars shifted, the moon older, and the hour no longer their own. There is a Persian legend that says the garden grows where sorrow ends. Each tear shed in peace, each final breath given without fear, falls to earth and plants a seed beyond time. When enough hearts have rested, the garden blooms again for an instant, just long enough for one wandering soul to glimpse it, to remember what eternity once felt like. Imagine standing there. The wind stills, the horizon folds inward, infinite yet intimate. And in that vast hush, you realize that every garden you have ever loved, every tree, every flower, every scent of rain, has been a reflection of this one, echoing through the centuries. You kneel, touch the ground, and the earth feels warm, alive. Beneath your fingertips you sense movement. Not roots, not stone, but time itself growing in circles. It breathes once, gently, and everything, every leaf, every sound, every forgotten name, exhales with it. Then the garden fades. He followed its first trail, a faint silver line curving south through what is now Jordan, across the Wadi Rum desert. There, under the arches of red stone carved by the wind, he found carvings that mirrored those on the parchment. Circles within circles, spirals of starlight etched into the rock. They were older than the Nabateans, older than any alphabet. Local Bedouin called them the eyes of time and avoided them at night, saying the wind there spoke in forgotten tongues. Not vanishing, but closing like an eyelid after a dream. Perhaps it never leaves. Perhaps we live inside it still. Scattered petals of eternity, drifting through the illusion of years. And when sleep comes and the heart slows, maybe the gate opens again. Just wide enough for us to remember the scent of rain that never fell, and the whisper of leaves that have never known decay. The garden beyond time waits, as it always has, patient, unseen, eternal, the memory of paradise dreaming itself back into being. The second trail on the map led toward the Sinai Peninsula, ending abruptly at a mark resembling an eye surrounded by concentric lines. Perhaps a spring, perhaps something more. Emile traveled there and found, near the base of Mount Serbal, the ruins of a sanctuary built into the stone. In its center stood a basin filled not with water, but with sand so fine it shimmered like glass. The air was cool, perfumed faintly with myrrh. On the walls were faint inscriptions, half Aramaic, half something else. He took sketches, but when he tried to copy them, the forms blurred in his mind. He wrote one final entry before vanishing. The map does not lead across the earth. It leads through it. The lines are not paths, but memories. Rivers of light beneath the crust of time. No one saw him again. His satchel was found years later in a Jerusalem archive, the map inside blank. Only the faint outline of a handprint remained, pressed into the parchment as if by warmth long faded. Perhaps the map was never meant to show distance, but longing. It charted not geography, but the spaces between understanding, the quiet regions of the soul that geography cannot measure. Every explorer, knowingly or not, carries such a map within them, drawn by memory, erased by time, redrawn by hope. And so, the listener drifts with the story, through dunes and ruins and stars. The path fades, but the wonder remains. Somewhere between candlelight and dream, a voice whispers from the parchment, "Follow what no longer shines." The wind answers, gentle and eternal, and the map folds itself once more into shadow. There was once a city that existed only by night, built entirely of pale limestone. It gleamed like a dream beneath the silver gaze of the moon. When daylight came, its walls turned colorless, its streets fell silent, and travelers passing through the valley swore they saw only dunes and wind. But when night returned, when the horizon filled with cool light, the city awoke again, and its towers rose like breath made visible. Fragments of its story survive in scattered writings. An inscription found near Luxor that speaks of the city of eternal reflection, a Babylonian tablet describing the kingdom that lives in moonlight, and the diary of the 19th century archaeologist Lady Hester Montrose, who claimed to have seen white arches gleaming from the sand like the bones of the world. No one has ever confirmed its location, though many have searched the Egyptian eastern desert, that lonely stretch between the Nile and the Red Sea, where ancient caravan routes once shimmered beneath the stars. Ruins found near Fawakar and Wadi Hammamat bear strange similarities. Smooth stone platforms aligned not to the sun, but to the cycles of the moon. Historians say they belonged to mining outposts. Yet some who stood there at dusk swore the stones seemed to glow faintly, as though remembering another purpose. The city, if it ever truly stood, was built by people who worshipped not a god of light, but a god of reflection. Their temples had no statues, only polished surfaces of silver and obsidian that captured the glow of the moon and released it in soft waves. Pilgrims came not to pray, but to listen. They said that under the full moon, the walls themselves sang low, harmonic tones, as if the stone was resonating with the pulse of the heavens. Imagine walking those streets at midnight, the air cool, the world washed in blue. No torches needed. The marble radiates its own quiet illumination. The scent of water lilies drifts from hidden courtyards. Every window shows the moon's face, sometimes whole, sometimes broken by passing clouds. And in the city's heart stands the Hall of Still Waters, a vast pool cut into the earth. Its surface mirrors the sky so perfectly that one cannot tell where reflection ends and stars begin. Archaeologists who studied desert acoustics say such resonance is possible, that some limestone chambers, shaped just right, amplify sound into haunting tones. But in this city, sound itself was a form of devotion. People believed that silence was not emptiness, but the breath of the divine. When dawn approached, they retreated indoors, drawing curtains woven with lunar threads, waiting for the next night's rising to begin their songs anew. Then came a night when the moon failed to rise. Astronomers might call it an eclipse, but the stories call it the night of veiled light. The city waited, lanterns unlit, confident the glow would return. It never did. The limestone, stripped of its celestial companion, lost its shimmer. The songs ceased. One by one, its lights faded until the desert reclaimed them all. Some say the people of that city walked into the dunes, following the vanishing moon until they too dissolved into the horizon. Others believe the city simply shifted, not vanished, but folded into another layer of reality, visible only when the world dreams. Even today, pilots flying over the eastern desert on moonlit nights sometimes report strange reflections below, symmetrical, fleeting, as if pale towers were surfacing through the sand. Perhaps the city still waits, not ruined, but resting, its temples untouched, its fountains filled with light instead of water. The moon will return someday, and the city will remember its song. Until then, the desert holds its silence. The wind moves over dunes shaped like broken domes, and the stars, too, seem dimmer, as though they mourn what they once reflected. And in the listener's mind, somewhere between wakefulness and dream, the city glows again for a moment. Faint, impossible, eternal. In the center of the desert, far from every caravan road and oasis, there is said to be a place where the wind reads. The dunes there hum softly at dusk, and travelers who have crossed the empty quarter speak of hearing voices beneath the sand, whispering not in language, but in memory. They call it the library beneath the wind, though no scholar can say where it begins or ends. The first written account came from an expedition in 1934, led by the archaeologist Gertrude Lemaire, who was mapping petroglyphs near Rub al-Khali, the vast Arabian desert where temperatures shimmer beyond endurance. Her team found fragments of stone tablets buried deep in a collapsed wadi. The carvings were faint but elegant, lines curved like breath, as if shaped by the wind itself. One of her assistants noted something peculiar. Each tablet hummed when held against the ear, a low resonance that seemed to come from within the stone. They brought several back to Cairo, where they disintegrated within days. Only sand remained. Historians trace the markings to the pre-Islamic kingdoms of the south, possibly Hadramaut or the people of Sheba, though the script bore no full resemblance to any known tongue. Its rhythm, they said, resembled both prayer and poetry. A desert priest later told Lemaire that such stones belonged to the library of breath, where the winds store every word ever spoken to the dunes. Each grain of sand, he said, was a letter. Each storm, a page turning. No one believed him, yet the legend grew. Some Bedouins still tell of ruins half-buried beyond the line of the horizon. A structure without walls, where the air thickens and the sound of moving sand becomes almost articulate. They say that if you sit there at dusk, the wind will begin to recite histories too ancient for the ear. It will speak of cities that have vanished, of kings whose names are lost to every chronicle but the desert's own memory. The library is not built of stone or brick, but of air and time. Its shelves are the spaces between dunes. Its archives are carved into silence. No one may enter it fully, for the sand shifts like thought itself, erasing and rebuilding every instant. And yet, some fragments endure. Carved steels found near the ancient incense route bare inscriptions that translate roughly to, "What is forgotten still breathes beneath the dust." Imagine standing there now. The horizon stretches in every direction, infinite and mercifully empty. The wind slides past like a living thing. Every gust carries particles of civilizations, the ash of temples, the dust of scrolls, the voices of prayers whispered for 1,000 years ago. The sky burns amber, the sand glows rose gold, and the entire desert feels like a page being turned slowly by unseen hands. At night, the temperature falls. The dunes harden, their shapes gleaming in the moonlight like sleeping waves. The sound of the wind changes, no longer fierce, but melodic, like a whisper through hollow bone. Some travelers describe it as chanting. They hear syllables that repeat, rising and falling, until the ear cannot tell if the desert is singing or remembering. There are theories, of course. Acousticians claim the phenomenon is natural, caused by friction between grains of silica, producing the singing sand, effect known from the deserts of Oman, Morocco, and Chile. But even the scientists fall silent when the sound grows too rhythmic, too human. One recording made in 1978 captured a pattern repeating 3 times, 12 seconds apart, and then never again. Perhaps the library does not exist in space at all, but in time. Every breath, every word ever spoken, is absorbed by air and dust. The desert keeps them not to reveal, but to preserve. What scholars call erosion, the desert calls memory. And if you stand there long enough, the sand begins to settle differently around your feet, as though taking note of your presence, storing even your silence within its endless archives. Eventually, the wind quiets, The last light fades into the horizon. You realize the desert has been listening as much as it has spoken. Somewhere beneath the shifting dunes, where sound and time are one, the library waits, unread, unruined, eternal. Perhaps the desert itself is the oldest book of all, written not in words, but in breath. Deep within a forest that no map now marks, there stands a temple that listens. Moss curls along its worn stone walls, the air heavy with the scent of rain and age. Travelers who have stumbled upon it, few as they are, say they never hear their own steps once they cross its threshold. The leaves rustle outside, the wind sighs through branches, but inside the temple all sound fades. Not into silence, but into something deeper, as though the very air has memory. It is believed to rest somewhere in the highlands of Sri Lanka, near the ruins of Ridagala, a mountain sacred to ancient hermits who spoke of the place where the world holds its breath. Archaeologists excavating there in the early 20th century found structures unlike any monastery. Vast halls with no altars, corridors that ended abruptly in sheer stone, and floors so perfectly balanced that sound refused to echo. Even the tools dropped by workers landed without noise. It was as if the temple itself absorbed every vibration, like a heart listening to itself. The inscriptions discovered nearby were written in a forgotten Pali dialect. One phrase repeats again and again. The ear of the world is always open. Scholars argued that the temple served as a sanctuary for meditative silence, a space where monks sought communion not through words, but through the absence of them. Yet the stories told by locals were stranger. They said the temple was never built. It was found, already standing, uncovered by a landslide after centuries of being buried beneath the forest. Those who entered spoke of faint impressions on the walls, not carved, but pressed, like the traces of hands or faces against soft clay. Some claimed to hear faint breathing within the stone, a rhythm almost like the sea. Once, during the 1964 monsoon, a researcher spent the night within its inner chamber. His notes, later recovered from a soaked journal, read, "The silence here feels alive. It is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of listening." No one stayed long. Even the birds refused to nest on the roof, and animals skirted the area in wide circles. Some said the temple was the ear of the earth, built, or perhaps grown, to record everything ever whispered, confessed, or prayed. Every tear dropped upon its stones, every breath taken in grief or devotion, still vibrates faintly beneath its surface, beyond human hearing. Imagine stepping into such a place. The moment you cross the gate, your pulse becomes the loudest sound in existence. Your footsteps vanish, yet your heartbeat echoes inside your skull. The world outside fades to green shadows and rain. You move through corridors lined with pillars covered in faint carvings of spirals and open eyes. There is no altar, no statue, no god, only air that feels weighted, aware. At the center of the temple lies a circular platform, smooth as glass, surrounded by shallow channels. Some believe these were used for meditation, to align the human breath with the rhythm of the earth's vibration. But others, mystics and poets, say the channels were meant for tears. Each drop of sorrow offered there would vanish instantly, absorbed into the floor, as though the stone were drinking it. At dusk, the forest breathes against the temple's outer walls. The last rays of light fall across moss and broken carvings, illuminating fragments of scripture that translate to, "Silence is not the end of sound. It is its return to origin." And as night rises, the temple grows almost invisible, a shadow within shadows, a thought within thought. Those who stand there long enough begin to feel a shift, not in the air, but in themselves. The silence becomes total, so absolute that one begins to hear inwardly. The blood moving, the breath looping, the memory unfolding. It is said that if you can endure that listening long enough, you begin to hear what the earth hears, the vibration of every living thing that has ever been, all resonating together in one infinite hum. No one can stay awake beyond that. The silence becomes a tide, and those who yield to it say they fall asleep standing, eyes open, dreaming not of sound, but of hearing itself. And when they awaken, they find the forest empty, the temple gone, or perhaps never there. Only the scent of wet moss remains, and the faint, impossible echo of their own last breath. Perhaps the temple was never built to be found. Perhaps it waits only for those who have forgotten how to speak, to remind them that the deepest voice in the world is silence itself. There is a river that flows through no map, and yet it has been spoken of for millennia. A current that remembers. Its waters move with a rhythm older than speech, carrying with them the murmur of countless names, whispered once and never forgotten. Some place it near the vanished land of Dilmun, the paradise of Sumerian myth, where sickness and death were unknown. Others believe it winds beneath the Nubian sands, flowing unseen beneath the bed of the Nile, its presence betrayed only by the way certain wells never dry, no matter how fierce the sun. There are fragments of it in every civilization's memory. The Egyptian texts speak of the river beneath memory, the Hebrew psalms of waters that know the voice of man. The old Persians called it Zarata, the river of breath. When archaeologists traced the ancient trade routes of Arabia, they uncovered dried channels that seemed to defy geography. Vast subterranean riverbeds linking coasts separated by impossible distances. In 1972, a team using satellite imagery discovered traces of a hidden waterway beneath the Rub al-Khali, connecting once lush plains that predate recorded history. The desert had swallowed its surface, but its memory lingered. And some say that even today, in the deep of night, if one stands at the edges of certain salt plains, one can hear it faintly, a distant, murmuring sound, as though the earth itself were whispering names through stone. The legends agree on one thing: the river remembers those who have touched it. Every traveler who drank from it or spoke beside its banks was said to be recorded in its current, not in ink or image, but in vibration, their essence carried within the water's endless motion. It was not immortality, but remembrance, a form of mercy granted by the earth itself. Poets of Mesopotamia described it as a silver line through eternity. They wrote that when a person dies, their reflection falls into the water and continues downstream, whispering back to the world they left behind. To listen was to feel the presence of all who had ever lived, an ocean of echoes beneath a single wave. Imagine walking along its hidden banks. The air is heavy, the soil soft underfoot. Every step feels like moving through dream. The reeds bend toward you as though in greeting. There is no sound of birds, no hum of insects, only the steady pulse of water moving somewhere beyond sight. When you kneel and press your ear to the ground, it comes. Faint at first, then clearer, thousands of voices murmuring, not in words, but in memory. Historians once dismissed these accounts as myth. Yet near the ancient oasis of Tema, archaeologists unearthed tablets depicting a river flowing beneath the feet of the living. A double current, one visible, one hidden. Inscriptions on the tablets translated roughly to, "All things that are named live twice, once in sound and once in the river." Perhaps the ancients understood something we have forgotten. That sound never truly dies. Every word ever spoken, every cry, every prayer becomes part of the vibration of the air, absorbed by stone, by water, by the slow heartbeat of the world. The river, then, is not just a body of water but a manifestation of that memory, a current of resonance that connects all things that have ever been called by name. There are stories of travelers who have found it, not through geography, but through silence. They say you must listen beneath your own thoughts, until the sound of your breath merges with the sound of flowing water. Then the river appears not as an image but as recognition. And when you touch it, the water greets you softly, as though it already knows who you are. In the final verses of a forgotten hymn, preserved in Akkadian script and found in the ruins of Mari, the poet writes, "When I die, I will fall into the river that remembers. It will carry me where no sand can bury, where my name will ripple among stars." Perhaps that is the river's truth. Not a place to find, but a truth to feel. For if memory is water, then every tear, every drop of rain, every tide that touches the shore is part of the same endless stream. The same gentle flow that whispers still beneath the Red Sea, the Nile, the Tigris, the heart. And when we sleep, perhaps we return there, floating without weight, without voice, becoming one more name carried softly downstream. into silence, into eternity. Beneath the paws of the great Sphinx, where shadow meets sand, there is said to be a chamber that breathes. The wind that moves across the Giza plateau carries whispers, low vibrations that rise from the ground itself, as though the earth were remembering something too ancient for words. Every dawn, when the first light spills across the limestone, the Sphinx seems to awaken for a moment, and those who stand before it swear they hear a faint hum, not of stone but of sleep. The Sphinx has watched the desert for nearly 5,000 years. Older than the pyramids beside it, older, some claim, than recorded Egypt itself. Her face, carved from a single ridge of bedrock, has seen the Nile change its course and empires rise like sandcastles only to dissolve. But beneath her, beyond reach, lies a silence no scholar has yet broken. The chamber long rumored by priests, mystics, and explorers alike. In 1926, during early excavations near the Dream Stele of Thutmose IV, archaeologists found signs of hollow resonance beneath the limestone base, a vibration that seemed too regular to be natural. The instruments of the time were crude, and the dig was halted before they could proceed. Later, in the 1970s, seismic readings taken by the Stanford Research Institute revealed two rectangular cavities beneath the Sphinx's forepaws, leading into deeper voids that branched toward the plateau. No one could explain their symmetry. Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities sealed the area, declaring the results inconclusive. But in the silence that followed, the legends stirred again. The ancient texts call it the Hall of Records, a place said to preserve the knowledge of the first time, the Zep-Tepi, when gods walked among men. The Book of the Dead speaks of the house beneath the lion, where the sky's memory sleeps in stone. Plato wrote of the priests of Sais who guarded a wisdom older than Atlantis, passed down through initiation beneath the temple of the great beast. Whether myth or metaphor, the story endures, that something beneath the Sphinx remembers what the world has forgotten. Imagine descending into that space. The air grows colder, heavier. The torchlight flickers on walls of pale limestone, carved with faint spirals that shimmer like veins of gold dust. The ceiling lowers until the air itself feels sacred, compressed. And then silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but of waiting. Some explorers claim to have found fragments of sealed shafts near the southern flank of the Sphinx, narrow tunnels that ended abruptly in smooth walls. The stone there was harder, older, different from the surrounding bedrock. One geologist noted traces of fossilized reeds, remnants of a time when this plateau was not desert, but sea. If the Sphinx was once carved when the Nile reached this far west, then her origin may reach back thousands of years beyond the dynasties we know, to an era when myth and memory were the same. The chamber, if it exists, might not hold scrolls or treasure, but vibration, resonance itself, the pure frequency of creation captured in stone. The priests who tended the Sphinx believed that knowledge was not written, but sung, encoded in harmonics that only the initiated could feel. Every line of the monument, from paw to tail to head, aligns with astronomical points. The Sphinx faces directly east, where the sun is reborn each morning. Some have said that when the equinox light touches its brow, the earth hums in tune, a single note of creation that echoes deep beneath its paws. Perhaps that sound is what the seismic instruments once heard, the chamber's breath. Archaeologists and mystics disagree, but the desert does not. It hides and reveals in equal measure. The Sphinx, eroded but unbroken, keeps her gaze on the horizon, patient, eternal. Beneath her lies either myth or the oldest truth of all. That memory, once buried deep enough, becomes indistinguishable from stone. At night, when the tourists are gone and the stars drift over Giza, the wind passes through the ruins like a voice. It curls around the paws of the Sphinx, flows between her ribs of limestone, and descends into the sand. And for a moment, just before dawn, the plateau hums. Maybe it is the earth itself exhaling. Or perhaps it is the whisper of a hidden door beneath eternity's oldest face, waiting still to be opened. High among the mountains, where the air thins to crystal and the world feels newly made, there once stood a monastery built upon light. Its walls were pale granite, veined with mica that caught the stars and scattered them across the courtyard like fragments of heaven. The monks who lived there were known not for their chants or prayers, but for the way they wrote, not by flame nor by sun, but by starlight alone. It was called the Cloister of the Falling Sky, perched on a ridge somewhere between the Himalayas and the Pamirs, at a height where no birds flew. It appeared only in a handful of records. A Chinese traveler in the Tang dynasty wrote of men whose books glowed in the dark and whose ink was made of heaven's dust. A later Persian geographer described a monastery at the edge of the world, where stars descend each night to be captured in bowls of silver. Modern historians believe these accounts refer to an isolated Buddhist or Bon monastery near ancient trade routes that once connected Kashgar, Ladakh, and Tibet, a sanctuary for scholars fleeing conquest during the 9th century. Among the artifacts recovered from nearby caves were fragments of parchment coated with strange mineral dust. When examined under ultraviolet light, the ink shimmered faintly blue, as though it had absorbed the color of the night itself. The monks believed the stars were the eyes of the universe, that each spark above was a thought, a moment of awareness from the cosmos itself. By writing beneath their light, they hoped to preserve not just words, but consciousness, to trap the essence of understanding within each stroke of the brush. They called their manuscripts sky pages, and their script was so delicate it was said to breathe when touched. Each night, they climbed to the open terraces, spreading their scrolls across stone tables cooled by wind. They ground their ink from meteorite dust, mixing it with melted snow and traces of saffron to bind it. The brushes were fashioned from the fur of mountain hares, so fine they seemed made of smoke. And when they wrote, they did so in silence, letting the faint glow of the stars reflect from bowls of water onto their parchment. The rhythm of their breathing became part of the writing itself. No one outside ever saw these manuscripts. When dawn arrived, the pages were stored in alcoves carved directly into the mountain, chambers that faced neither east nor west, but upward. The monks said the texts were not to be read, only to be remembered by the air. Centuries later, during an expedition in 1921, explorers found remnants of a collapsed monastery in the Wakhan corridor. Among the ruins was a single sheet of parchment sealed in resin. On it were tiny symbols, too precise to be random, arranged in spirals that mirrored known star patterns. Astronomers noted that the design aligned perfectly with the night sky as it appeared around 780 CE. It was not a text, but a map written in language and constellation, both a hymn in geometry. Legend says that on certain nights of perfect clarity, when no moon shone and no cloud crossed the heavens, the monks would stop writing and simply wait. The stars, they said, would grow brighter, as if noticing the watchers below. Then, for a few seconds, the courtyard would fill with a soft, descending light, and every stone would gleam as though made of liquid silver. Some claimed this was only high-altitude lightning, others the mind of the cosmos returning their gaze. The last record of the monastery comes from a Ladakhi pilgrim who passed through the mountains in the 13th century. He wrote, "I found only walls that shimmered like frost. The air was filled with a music I could not hear but only feel. The stones seemed to breathe light. After that, the monastery vanished from all memory. Its name, its order, its books. The mountains reclaimed it, folding it back into the fabric of the stars. Yet even today, trekkers crossing those ridges report faint glows in the night, blue lights that hover over the valleys, flickering like forgotten pages turning themselves. Perhaps the monks' writings were never meant to be read. Perhaps they wrote for the stars themselves, returning language to its source. And maybe, somewhere in the thin air between heaven and earth, the starlit words still float, shining softly, waiting to be understood by whatever listens beyond the sky. There was once a kingdom so radiant that its very streets shone like dawn. It stood, they say, somewhere between Persia and the Caspian shore, built from glass so pure that it caught the light of the sun and fractured it into rivers of color. Travelers called it Shari'ain, the city of mirrors. When the wind passed through it, the whole realm shimmered like water, as though the sky itself had been turned upside down.